MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number. Analysis. Many people look for safety and security in popular thinking. They figure that if a lot of people are doing something, then it must be right. It must be a good idea. If most people accept it, then it probably represents fairness, equality, compassion, and sensitivity, right? Not necessarily. Popular thinking said the Earth was the center of the universe, yet Copernicus studied the stars and planets and proved mathematically that the Earth and the other planets in our solar system revolved around the Sun. Copernicus. Popular thinking said surgery didn't require clean instruments, yet Joseph Lister studied the high death rates in hospitals and introduced antiseptic practices that immediately saved lives. Joseph Lister. Popular thinking said that women shouldn't have the right to vote, yet people like Emmeline Pankhurst and Susan B. Anthony fought for and won that right. Emmeline Pankhurst, Susan B. Anthony. We must always remember there is a huge difference between acceptance and intelligence. People may say that there's safety in numbers, but that's not always true. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number. 01. As always happens with natural selection, bats and their prey have been engaged in a life-or-death sensory arms race for millions of years. It's believed that hearing in moths arose specifically in response to the threat of being eaten by bats. Not all insects can hear. Over millions of years, moths have evolved the ability to detect sounds at ever higher frequencies, and, as they have, the frequencies of bats' vocalizations have risen, too. Some moth species have also evolved scales on their wings and a fur-like coat on their bodies. Both act as acoustic camouflage, by absorbing sound waves in the frequencies emitted by bats, thereby preventing those sound waves from bouncing back. The B-2 bomber and other stealth aircraft have fuselages made of materials that do something similar with radar beams. B-2. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number. 02. In adolescence many of us had the experience of falling under the sway of a great book or writer. We became entranced by the novel ideas in the book, and because we were so open to influence, these early encounters with exciting ideas sank deeply into our minds and became part of our own thought processes, affecting us decades after we absorbed them. Such influences enriched our mental landscape, and in fact our intelligence depends on the ability to absorb the lessons and ideas of those who are older and wiser. Just as the body tightens with age, however, so does the mind. And just as our sense of weakness and vulnerability motivated the desire to learn, so does our creeping sense of superiority slowly close us off to new ideas and influences. Some may advocate that we all become more skeptical in the modern world, but in fact a far greater danger comes from the increasing closing of the mind that burdens us as individuals as we get older, and seems to be burdening our culture in general. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number. 03. The connectedness of the global economic market makes it vulnerable to potential infection. A financial failure can make its way from borrowers to banks to insurers, spreading like a flu. However, there are unexpected characteristics when it comes to such infection in the market. Infection can occur even without any contact. A bank might become insolvent even without having any of its investments fail. Fear and uncertainty can be damaging to financial markets, just as cascading failures due to bad investments. If we all woke up tomorrow and believed that Bank X would be insolvent, then it would become insolvent. X. In fact, it would be enough for us to fear that others believed that Bank X was going to fail, or just to fear our collective fear. X. We might all even know that Bank X was well managed with healthy investments, but if we expected others to pull their money out, then we would fear being the last to pull our money out. X. Financial distress can be self-fulfilling and is a particularly troublesome aspect of financial markets. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 04. Observational studies of humans cannot be properly controlled. Humans live different lifestyles and in different environments. Thus, they are insufficiently homogeneous to be suitable experimental subjects. These confounding factors undermine our ability to draw sound causal conclusions from human epidemiological surveys. Confounding factors are variables, known or unknown, that make it difficult for epidemiologists to isolate the effects of the specific variable being studied. For example, Taubes argued that since many people who drink also smoke, researchers have difficulty determining the link between alcohol consumption and cancer. Taube. Similarly, researchers in the famous Framingham study identified a significant correlation between coffee drinking and coronary heart disease. Framingham. However, most of this correlation disappeared once researchers corrected for the fact that many coffee drinkers also smoke. If the confounding factors are known, it is often possible to correct for them. However, if they are unknown, they will undermine the reliability of the causal conclusions we draw from epidemiological surveys. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 05. As well as making sense of events through narratives, historians in the ancient world established the tradition of history as a source of moral lessons and reflections. The history writing of Livy or Tacitus, for instance, was in part designed to examine the behavior of heroes and villains, meditating on the strengths and weaknesses in the characters of emperors and generals, providing exemplars for the virtuous to imitate or avoid. Livy Tacitus. This continues to be one of the functions of history. French chronicler Jean Froissart said he had written his accounts of chivalrous knights fighting in the 100 Years' War so that brave men should be inspired thereby to follow such examples. Jean Froissart. Today, historical studies of Lincoln, Churchill, Gandhi, or Martin Luther King, Jr. perform the same function. Lincoln, Churchill, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Jr. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 06. What is unusual about journalism as a profession is its lack of independence. In theory, practitioners in the classic professions, like medicine or the clergy, contain the means of production in their heads and hands, and therefore do not have to work for a company or an employer. They can draw their income directly from their clients or patients. Because the professionals hold knowledge, moreover, their clients are dependent on them. Journalists hold knowledge, but it is not theoretical in nature. One might argue that the public depends on journalists in the same way that patients depend on doctors, but in practice a journalist can serve the public usually only by working for a news organization, which can fire her or him at will. Journalists' income depends not on the public, but on the employing news organization, which often derives the large majority of its revenue from advertisers. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 07. According to many philosophers, there is a purely logical reason why science will never be able to explain everything. For in order to explain something, whatever it is, we need to invoke something else. But what explains the second thing? To illustrate, recall that Newton explained a diverse range of phenomena using his law of gravity. But what explains the law of gravity itself? If someone asks why all bodies exert a gravitational attraction on each other, what should we tell them? Newton had no answer to this question. In Newtonian science the law of gravity was a fundamental principle, it explained other things, but could not itself be explained. The moral generalizes. However much the science of the future can explain, the explanations it gives will have to make use of certain fundamental laws and principles. Since nothing can explain itself, it follows that at least some of these laws and principles will themselves remain unexplained. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 08. In one example of the important role of laughter in social contexts, Devereux and Ginsberg examined frequency of laughter in matched pairs of strangers or friends who watched a humorous video together compared to those who watched it alone. Devereux-Ginsberg. The time individuals spent laughing was nearly twice as frequent in pairs as when alone. Frequency of laughing was only slightly shorter for friends than strangers. According to Devereux and Ginsberg, laughing with strangers served to create a social bond that made each person in the pair feel comfortable. Devereux-Ginsberg. This explanation is supported by the fact that in their stranger condition, when one person laughed, the other was likely to laugh as well. Interestingly, the three social conditions, alone, paired with a stranger, or paired with a friend, did not differ in their ratings of funniness of the video or of feelings of happiness or anxiousness. This finding implies that their frequency of laughter was not because we find things funnier when we are with others, but instead we are using laughter to connect with others. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 09. One vivid example of how a market mindset can transform and undermine an institution is given by Dan Ariely in his book Predictably Irrational. Predictably Irrational Dan Ariely. He tells the story of a daycare center in Israel that decided to fine parents who arrived late to pick up their children, in the hope that this would discourage them from doing so. In fact, the exact opposite happened. Before the imposition of fines, parents felt guilty about arriving late, and guilt was effective in ensuring that only a few did so. Once a fine was introduced, it seems that in the minds of the parents the entire scenario was changed from a social contract to a market one. Essentially, they were paying for the center to look after their children after hours. Some parents thought it worth the price, and the rate of late arrivals increased. Significantly, once the center abandoned the fines and went back to the previous arrangement, late arrivals remained at the high level they had reached during the period of the fines. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 10. When self-handicapping, you're engaging in behavior that you know will harm your chances of succeeding. You know that you won't do as well on the test if you go out the night before, but you do it anyway. Why would anyone intentionally harm their chances of success? Well, here's a possible answer. Say that you do study hard. You go to bed at a decent time and get 8 hours of sleep. 8. Then you take the maths test, but don't do well, you only get a C. C. What can you conclude about yourself? Probably that you're just not good at maths, which is a pretty hard blow to your self-esteem. But if you self-handicap, you'll never be in this position because you're creating a reason for your failure. You were bound to get a C, you can tell yourself, because you went out till 1 a.m. 1 C. That C doesn't mean that you're bad at maths, it just means that you like to party. C. Self-handicapping seems like a paradox, because people are deliberately harming their chances of success. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14 Number 11. Early in the term, our art professor projected an image of a monk, his back to the viewer, standing on the shore, looking off into a blue sea and an enormous sky. The professor asked the class, "What do you see?" The darkened auditorium was silent. We looked and thought as hard as possible to unearth the hidden meaning, but came up with nothing. We must have missed it. With dramatic exasperation she answered her own question, "It's a painting of a monk. His back is to us. He is standing near the shore. There's a blue sea and enormous sky. Why didn't we see it?" So as not to bias us, she'd posed the question without revealing the artist or title of the work. In fact, it was Caspar David Friedrich's The Monk by the Sea. Caspar David Friedrich, The Monk by the Sea. To better understand your world, consciously acknowledge what you actually see rather than guess at what you think you are supposed to see. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14, Number 12. Even companies that sell physical products to make profit are forced by their boards and investors to reconsider their underlying motives and to collect as much data as possible from consumers. Supermarkets no longer make all their money selling their produce and manufactured goods. They give you loyalty cards with which they track your purchasing behaviors precisely. Then supermarkets sell this purchasing behavior to marketing analytics companies. The marketing analytics companies perform machine learning procedures, slicing the data in new ways, and resell behavioral data back to product manufacturers as marketing insights. When data and machine learning become currencies of value in a capitalist system, then every company's natural tendency is to maximize its ability to conduct surveillance on its own customers because the customers are themselves the new value creation devices. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14, Number 13. In the modern world, we look for certainty in uncertain places. We search for order in chaos, the right answer in ambiguity, and conviction in complexity. We spend far more time and effort on trying to control the world, best-selling writer Yuval Noah Harari says, than on trying to understand it. Yuval Noah Harari. We look for the easy-to-follow formula. Over time, we lose our ability to interact with the unknown. Our approach reminds me of the classic story of the drunk man searching for his keys under a street lamp at night. He knows he lost his keys somewhere on the dark side of the street but looks for them underneath the lamp, because that's where the light is. Our yearning for certainty leads us to pursue seemingly safe solutions by looking for our keys under street lamps. Instead of taking the risky walk into the dark, we stay within our current state, however inferior it may be. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14, Number 14. A recent study shows that dogs appear to form mental images of people's faces. Scientists placed 28 dogs in front of a computer monitor blocked by an opaque screen, then played a recording of the dog's human guardian or a stranger saying the dog's name 5 times through speakers in the monitor. 285. Finally, the screen was removed to reveal either the face of the dog's human companion or a stranger's face. The dog's reactions were videotaped. Naturally, the dogs were attentive to the sound of their name, and they typically stared about 6 seconds at the face after the screen was removed. 6. But they spent significantly more time gazing at a strange face after they had heard the familiar voice of their guardian. That they paused for an extra second or two suggests that they realized something was wrong. The conclusion drawn is that dogs form a picture in their mind, and that they can think about it and make predictions based on that picture. And, like us, they are puzzled when what they see or hear doesn't match what they were expecting. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14, Number 15. Sociologists have proven that people bring their own views and values to the culture they encounter. Books, TV programs, movies, and music may affect everyone, but they affect different people in different ways. TV. In a study, Neil Vidmer and Milton Rokiak showed episodes of the sitcom All in the Family to viewers with a range of different views on race. Neil Vidmer, Milton Rokiak, All in the Family. The show centers on a character named Archie Bunker, an intolerant bigot who often gets into fights with his more progressive family members. Archie Bunker. Vidmer and Rokiak found that viewers who didn't share Archie Bunker's views thought the show was very funny in the way it made fun of Archie's absurd racism. In fact, this was the producer's intention. Vidmer Rokiak Archie Bunker Archie. On the other hand, though, viewers who were themselves bigots thought Archie Bunker was the hero of the show and that the producers meant to make fun of his foolish family. Archie Bunker, Bunker. This demonstrates why it's a mistake to assume that a certain cultural product will have the same effect on everyone. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 242, Chapter 14, Number 16. The availability heuristic refers to a common mistake that our brains make by assuming that the instances or examples that come to mind easily are also the most important or prevalent. It shows that we make our decisions based on the recency of events. We often misjudge the frequency and magnitude of the events that have happened recently because of the limitations of our memories. According to Harvard professor Max Bazerman, managers conducting performance appraisals often fall victim to the availability heuristic. Harvard, Max Bazerman. The recency of events highly influences a supervisor's opinion during performance appraisals. Managers give more weight to performance during the 3 months prior to the evaluation than to the previous 9 months of the evaluation period because the recent instances dominate their memories. 9.3. The availability heuristic is influenced by the ease of recall or retrievability of information of some event. Ease of recall suggests that if something is more easily recalled in your memory, you think that it will occur with a high probability. MTC. Good job.